Hi everyone, and welcome to the Delaware VDA webinar series. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the analysis involved with the VDA. My name's Kevin. I'm here with my colleagues Sarah and Max. We're going to go ahead and get started. So what are the best ways to perform analysis in this process?
So the best way to perform an analysis in the VDA process is a standardized review. It's a structured review that is consistent over a period of time. We normally review records that are pertaining to outstanding checks and disbursement records.
So who would be responsible for conducting the analysis in the VDA process?
So typically you want your subject matter experts, your accounting folks, your finance folks to be looking at the data and doing this analysis. However, for this level of analysis, what we see is that a third-party advocate is engaged to assist.
So how do you go about creating research populations during the VDA analysis?
We identify outstanding checks, age credits, and unresolved transactions. From there, we put together their property types and group them together systematically. We make the research populations for the holder, and they then work on their remediation efforts.
So Max, you mentioned at the end of that the holder's remediation efforts. Sarah, can you elaborate on that and what that entails?
Right. So after these schedules or items are put together in a population, it's sent over to the holder, and the holder's responsibility is to look at each item and, number one, determine if it's unclaimed property. Two different directions you can go on this. Number one, is it unclaimed property and it should be reported? Or number two, if it's not unclaimed property. Easy part is it's unclaimed property. You know that's part of the liability. The other piece is where it's not unclaimed property, and that's where you have to take efforts to show the support to determine, hey, this is actually not due to an owner and it is not part of the liability, and ultimately removed from the schedules. That would be the process that you undergo with the holder, and they would need their subject matter experts to dig back into systems and their data to find answers on that.
Yeah, sure. So for an example, they're able to show that a check was paid that was part of the populations, and they can provide support showing that, and that clears the items out of the population.
Right. And I do want to add one other thing is we often see kind of messy accounting records. And oftentimes, if something is not actually due as unclaimed property, you'd want to do the proper entries to ensure that does not show as outstanding on your books anymore.
So we're going to talk a little bit about estimations and how they apply to the Delaware VDA. When a holder does not have complete and researchable records for the full period of the VDA lookback, they use estimations to account for the liability in those years. Sarah, can you elaborate on estimations and how they're applied?
Sure. So I would say most holders don't have records that go that far back. So you're going to have to take the most complete and researchable periods. And typically what we do is we take a base period, 2 to 3 years, essentially. We calculate the liability during that period and create what we call an error rate. And that error rate is then applied to former years to fill in that liability. It's just an estimation calculation. Pretty typical.
Sure. So you're saying the base years are used to create an error rate, which is then applied to the estimation years against revenue, and that's how we come up with the estimations for incomplete and non-researchable years.
Correct.
So what rules determine the look-back period and, how it needs to be analyzed?
Well, it's the Delaware VDA statutes. It is a 10-year look-back, and you also have to consider the fact there's that 5-year dormancy period as well. That's straight across the board with all the Delaware reviews.
Mm-hmm. So 10 years plus dormancy is really like a 15-year review. Yeah. As part of the Delaware VDA, is there any owner outreach that's conducted, and what steps are taken in those attempts?
So Kevin, after the research populations have concluded, it's required from the state of Delaware to run due diligence letters, formal due diligence letters to the rightful owners. The goal here, Kevin, is to return the property to the rightful owner before reporting it to the state.
So as we're wrapping up a VDA, what documentation standards does the state expect in terms of supporting your findings?
So first of all, you want to keep a full audit trail, right? And earlier I said, and I'll reiterate this again, that you want to keep support specifically for the items that were not unclaimed property. Everything that you pulled from your ERP systems, any notes, emails, any supporting documentation, you're going to want to keep that on file, and you're going to want to keep that in accordance with your retention policies.
Sure, and that would be included in the package you're submitting to the state administrator for review?
Correct. Typically, they want to see some support in terms of the work that you did.
It related to the research populations.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah and Max, for navigating us through the analysis part of the VDA, which tends to be, a very difficult process. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on future episodes of our Delaware VDA webinar series.